So today's video on is on the genetics series, and it's the second video on the genetic series. And today we will be discussing autosomal recessive conditions, our family tree pedigree analysis. So there are four features on a pedigree to say that this condition is an autosomal recessive condition. The first feature is that there will be skipping generation on family tree, and such as there will be no affected individual and generations. Is we say only in autosomal dominant conditions, we say that there will be affected individual on a generation. This is not a case for an autosomal recessive condition or any recessive condition. So there will be unaffected generation, and then there will be the appearance of the affected individual on a certain generation down the line. Okay, the second feature is that male and female will be equally affected. Uh, the third feature is that both parents should have at least one abnormal copy of the gene to actually transmit the disease to the offspring. In other words, there should be at least carrier for the condition to transmit or to have an affected child. The fourth one is that there is a 25% of the offspring of the carrier parents will be affected. Okay, so here we have a pedigree for analysis, and we have this male which is having which is carrier for the state, but the mother is normal. So normally the carrier state is either represented by half shading or just in the appropriate sex symbol we just put a dot. So here we have put a dot, and we have representing here a carrier father and a normal mother with no affected allele or copy of the gene. So here you can see this generation, the P generation, does not have an affected individual, although a carrier is present in the form of father. So F1 generation, we don't see any affected individual here, but the carriers are there. And similarly, in the F2 generation, we also don't see the affected individual, but there are carriers. But when two carriers which have, like this mother had an affected copy or abnormal copy of the gene, and this father also, and usually such genes are such are seen in consanguineous marriages. So consanguinity could be one reason for more autosomal condition, but it does not always explain. It can randomly happen in population. So here these individuals which have an affected copy each have affected offspring here, and you can see the male and female are equally affected. So the first feature that you will be skipped generation. So we have seen that this the parental generation doesn't have an affected, F1 doesn't have, F2 doesn't have, but there is if this generation is affected. Okay, so, and the second thing is that male and female are equally affected, and the third is that it only happened when both the parents were carrier. Okay, so here we see this the phenomenon of horizontal transmission. So in an autosomal dominant condition, we saw that every generation had an affected individual, so it was transmitted downward like in a vertical pattern. But here you see a more of horizontal pattern. What does it mean? It means that there are affected individual on the same generation, and there are no individual that are affected vertically. So we call it kind of horizontal transmission. Now we have to discuss the possibility of different combinations. For instance, this female who is an affected individual marries a normal person, and when we draw the Mendelian 2x2 table, we can see here this is the mother and this is the father. So the combination possible is, these are the possible combination, and if you have a close look, all of them are carrier and there are no affected individual. So they have carrier, all of them, no affected. Okay. Okay, another combination is, let's say, both, as we saw, this is either father or mother, but she is, let's say this is mother, so she is affected. She has the disease because she is homozygous for the condition. But the father is a carrier. Only the father is a carrier. So what happened here? That in this case, 50% of the individual are affected, and 50% of the carrier, so no normal child, and 50% they will be phenotypically normal, they will not have the disease, but these 50% will have they are homozygous for the condition, so they will have the phenotype for the condition. Okay, so this is the actual this is normally happen, that a carrier marries another carrier, and what happens here, the only 25% of the individual are affected, 50% of them are carrier, and 25% are unaffected or normal. So if, let's say, you ask about a autosomal recessive condition like let's say like cystic fibrosis, and they ask you that, okay, the parent have one affected child, uh, let's say for an autosomal recessive condition, so what is the recurrence rate? So 25% is the recurrence risk in this case. So you can say for every pregnancy there is a chance that the affected individual, 25% of the recurrent chance is seen for every pregnancy. Okay, example of the autosomal recessive condition: cystic fibrosis, sickle cell disease, galactosemia, thalassemia, GSD, phenylketonuria. So normally the metabolic disease, or most of the metabolic disease, are autosomal recessive conditions. One important, whenever we talk about the autosomal recessive condition, we talk about heterozygote advantage or natural selections. So in general population, like for instance, those for an autosomal recessive condition, if you are heterozygous, means you are only a carrier, you have certain advantages. And these advantages are like in the case of sickle cell disease, if you are a carrier, you are such as you have a normal copy, and you have an abnormal copy that have a sickle cell gene, abnormal sickle cell gene. So you have sickle cell trait. So you have some advantage in case of the malaria, that you have better survival rate for malaria. And in case of cystic fibrosis, they say that if you are carrier for cystic fibrosis, such as you have only one of the affected gene, then you have some advantage against cholera or E. coli infection. So when we say that these conditions are more prevalent in certain population, this may be only explained by this zygote advantage. So they are naturally selected, and so we see some disease more often in certain population rather than in general population. So this is another important phenomenon. So in a nutshell, if we have to revise autosomal recessive condition, the first feature will be that not every generation will have an affected individual. Okay, number one, not every generation will have an affected individual. Number one. Okay, the second concept of horizontal transmissions. So actually these two are same in a different way. So we see affected individuals on same generation, but not up and down the generation. Third is male and female are equally affected. Fourth, it is a 25% chance of recurrence if both parents are carrier. And finally, and the most important point is that it will only happen if both parents are carrier. Thank you so much.